only in that complete submission. And that, in a sense, is what God offers to humanity, is that in that instance, human beings are completely submissive. And in that act of being completely submissive and bearing witness, they are actually completely bound and completely free at the same time, because they are participating in that divine freedom. And then it is to come to this process of realizing the submission, what's called the process in a sense of tawakkul, that one then slowly realizes that this, what we imagine to be free will, because usually we're looking at it as we're looking at it horizontally in our everyday experience, as I can put my hand here, I can put my hand here, but that's not freedom. And it's only the vertical freedom of participating in the divine wherein true freedom can be found.
Okay, well, I'm going to abuse my power and just ask a really quick follow-up question, which is, yes, Farhana, if I could just, but in other words, is that your...
That's my tafsir.
That's your tafsir, that's your tawil
No,
of that verse, right? Okay,
yeah.
you haven't found that's just my, that's just my, okay, Farhana, please, yes.
Because, actually, no, we should let Professor Dali, because he'll grill me after that.
No.
Expose, no, Farhana first, but I'm saying he's going to expose the faults in my thinking.
I just wanted to say, I think on this topic of predestination, because in the Tafsir Jafri it's present very rigorously, but if we look at the cosmology, if we locate the moment of the ahd in the azal, which is in the alam al-arwah, which is before spirits enter souls, let alone bodies, at that moment it is a contract, it is an agreement between God spirit and spirit that is archetype of a creature. And it involves free will, but of course when you're talking about the alam al-arwah, the substance is just pure divine spirit.
Yeah.
So there is this sort of agreement, substantial continuity, but there is a consent that is given by the spirit that is archetype of creature that is given to God spirit, if I may put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, to me, looking at the cosmology, and it is, as you said, esoteric, it's on that level, that shows that there is a real free will, but when you come into the realm of kawn and creation, it seems like it is predetermined because it's pre-temporal, but it is not, and we forget that we agreed, that our spirits agreed, and so it seems like an imposition. Just to throw that in.
I actually think that's very good, and one could also connect that to the famous verse, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, that makes that connection between that the human spirit is actually somehow mysteriously the very ruh spirit of the divine.
John?
No, actually, you misinterpreted what I said. I said you were exactly right.
Oh. Oh, he's my greatest critic, so that's good.
Please.
Thank you, Dr. Lumbard, for that fascinating paradigm. That's kind of like you're kind of shifting the paradigm on how to read these verses or understand these verses, especially in contrast to Nasikh al-Mansukh and the entire ijma and the force of the tradition that comes with it. I mean, this is a really a ground-shifting approach. My question pertains, most of your discussion was centered within the Semitic traditions. I would like to kind of shift it a little bit and kind of direct it towards the non-Semitic traditions. Is it possible to read or interpret these verses that deal with the covenant in a non-covenantal fashion, because these non-Semitic religions don't have that same symbolic referent within their religious cosmology? Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and my personal opinion is yes, the fact that in one religion you have a non-theistic religion and therefore a different understanding. I think that one could definitely link this to other traditions, and I would actually be interested in doing that myself. I do, however, think that if we were to follow something along what Dr. Crane was proposing, where this could actually have broader influence, that the first phase is to not do that. These things, in a sense, that one has to kind of, and because you can't, when you're talking about it, to kind of ground the Quranic concept and then do it within the tafsir tradition, you first have to have it within that, within, shall we say, the reference that are the frame of discourse that is already set by these sources. And within that frame of discourse, you've basically got the Judeo-Christian tradition. Now, there are, of course, those verses where God says that every human collectivity has been sent a messenger, and this happens with every human collectivity. And then there are those verses in the Quran which say, those messengers of which we have told you and those of which we have not told you, which definitely have this implication that there is a much broader concept of religion than what is immediately mentioned within the text. And so those, I think, can be taken as avenues by which one could then open the discourse into those. But personally, in terms of doing that, I'd like to, in a sense, get this phase of it more ironed out.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thanks so much, Dr. Lumbard, for your presentation. You built upon Tabari and Ibn Kathir and Qurtubi and others in your presentation in your argument of covenant pluralism. So I guess I'm just curious to see what do you think Tabari, and how would Tabari react, Ibn Kathir, Qurtubi, to your conclusion?
I think they'd love it. I don't know. It's interesting. One of the things that Professor Dale brought out to me one time when we were discussing this is that whole idea of naskh. Qurtubi mentions that people tend to misinterpret and misunderstand naskh and think that it is flat-out abrogation, whereas naskh can also be understood as being, how did you phrase it? Setting conditions? Specification. And so so this can kind of open up into understanding that it's more about specifications of how one observes the covenant in different ways. Now, I personally think that when you go through, one is often surprised by gems that one finds in the tafsir tradition. And a lot of these little gems, they're like little nuggets. It's almost as if you have a mufassir opening up to a little bit more of their private thoughts, and and you might say letting down their guard as one of the authorities who maintains the walls of the city, shall we say, to use the analogy of a medieval city as the walls of orthodoxy. And just as I told you about this situation with, to go back to Ahmad Tayyib and his idea of Islam always referring to universal submission, these are types of things which happen in private discourse and develop over years with authorities of religion. And so it might be something to which they would be open on one level, but again, the reason that I want to cite Tabari, Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, Ash-Shawkani, and others when talking about this is so that it will be a discourse which people who hold positions akin to that in today's Islamic world will engage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, both of you, for a very interesting panel.